Welcome to Higher Education Advocates Podcast. This podcast is about supporting students and families as they navigate through the post-secondary complexities of college. From time to time, I will touch base on current events. Expect to hear jam-packed information that includes strategies and tips. The goal is to empower families and help them make informed decisions. Expect to hear from higher education professionals, HR professionals, tax pros, mental health professionals, financial aid administrators, students, parents, plus more. My name is Teresa Harris, and I'm a college financial aid expert. I'm also the founder and owner of Scholarship Momma. I have a master's in higher education, and I am an alum of Robert Morris University in Chicago. I'm a wife, mom, and grandmother. My heart is for our youth, but the information I'm sharing is relevant for all age groups. When it comes to college, my experience as an adult student was fantastic. I was eager to learn and ready to start a new career, and the only way I could pay for college was to borrow loans. One thing I failed to realize is the impact student loans would have on my future. I borrowed thousands of dollars during my undergraduate career, and as time went on, the amount I owed ballooned. As of this recording, I'm still paying off student loans, and I completed college years ago. For the record, I don't have anything against student loans, but I do believe in responsible borrowing, which is something I didn't do. As for the podcast, expect to hear from me on a bi-weekly basis. This podcast is available on Anchor FM and Scholarship Momma YouTube channel. For more information, check out my website, www.scholarshipmomma.com. Hey friends, I'm back with a packed episode. This is Teresa Harris, aka Scholarship Momma, and welcome to Higher Education Advocates Podcast. I'm happy to have on the show today Mr. Glenn. He is the owner of ACT Prep Chicago. Today, we are going to be talking about the ACT SAT. Welcome, Mr. Glenn. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey, Miss Scholarship Momma. First of all, I just want to say thank you for having me be a part of this podcast and be able to discuss some ideas with your audience and your following, and also for allowing me to be part of the Scholarship Summit. That was a great event, great opportunity to reach an audience and help these young people kind of make decisions as it relates to higher education and lining themselves up to have the careers that they want. So first of all, I'd like to thank you for having me again. And I look forward to anytime, you need me or want me, just let me know.
You are welcome.
Yeah. So tell me about myself. So right now, so I guess I have a tutoring, a test prep business. What we essentially do is, well, obviously things have changed due to COVID, but we help students prepare for the ACT, for the SAT, which is specifically what I'm talking about here, but we also do one-on-one tutoring for academic subjects. So math, some English, maybe some reading, but mostly math, upper elementary and high school students. We help them with their math with their schools, just to make sure that they understand how to do the problem, so forth and so on. I've probably been doing that. And then I worked for a company, started maybe while I was in grad school, 2001, 2002. Then as a result of working with that company, I teamed up with a colleague to start a test prep business 2009, but it wasn't formally recognized. And then about maybe 2012, we moved into the space we had been occupying before COVID hit, and we're still occupying it, but more everything's online. But Greater Auburn Gresham Development Corporation, which is 7901 South Racine, and they've been very helpful in assisting me to get the business kind of going. So it became a more formal and business licensed business in 2015, 2016. And so been operating it for years, and just reason I moved it to the Greater Progressive Development Corporation's office was twofold. Number one, I was tutoring the director's children, and it was easier for him, and they had a bigger space available. But also I wanted to put a service like a tutoring and test prep service in an area where there weren't many tutoring and test prep services, as a way to build up the community via education. And so that was my inspiration, and that continues to be my goal as I continue to, work. But obviously, with everything online, I'm not working in the community at this point. But once COVID is over, I plan on going back to the office, Greater Progressive Development Corporation's office, and they may even move their office because they just got a $5 million grant from the city of Chicago and a $10 million grant from the state of Illinois to operate a bigger facility. So I may be moving into that bigger facility after COVID is over. I don't know exactly, but yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Such humble beginnings. And I am very familiar with the community that you are in. So thank you for serving that community. So in the world of ACT and SAT, I mean, everything. I hear so much about it. It's all over Facebook. It's all over social media. It's just confusion. And I'm so glad that you are on the show today to clear up some of this confusion. So here's my first question. What is test optional admissions and scholarships?
Well, and that's a good question. And I think so. I guess there's a short answer and a long answer. So the short answer is test optional essentially is what it means, right? You have the option to take the test to gain admissions to specific colleges and universities. That's the short answer. And so the longer answer is that these test optional opportunities are carried out in many different ways. So some schools are purely test optional, where you admit whether you submit your standardized test score or not has no bearing on scholarship or admissions. Then there are other schools that are slightly test optional, where fully test optional for admissions, but for scholarships is different. So you don't have to submit your test to gain admissions, but to gain certain scholarships or access to certain scholarships or access to certain programs at that college or university, you have to take the standardized test. And then you have other colleges where it's test optional for in-state students, but not test optional for out-of-state students. So if you're in-state, you don't have to take the test to gain admissions, but if you're out-of-state, you do have to take the test. And then you have test optional, meaning that to get into the school, it's test optional. But then once you're there, they may want you to take the standardized test, the ACT or the SAT, for placement purposes, so that you're not placed in class, so that students aren't placed in classes that could be too challenging for them, or it could be going too fast based on the student's current skill set.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
I am so glad you are here.
Yeah.
Help us out. That's a lot. Well, thank you for that. So given the standardized exam, or shall I say, should a student take a standardized exam given the recent rise in test optional admissions and scholarships? Is it even required now?
Well, yeah, and so here's the thing. So according to my statistics, I think the last time I looked, there were over 4,000 to 5,000 colleges and universities in America, and I think maybe 1,000 plus, maybe 17, close to 2,000. And I think I was getting this from Fair Test's website and some other websites. So roughly about 1/3 of the colleges and universities are test optional, and this includes some of your trade schools like beauty schools and stuff like that as well, right? So it's not just pure academic college and universities. So those schools probably weren't test optional anyway. I mean, they weren't. They were always test optional. Well, they didn't require tests at all, right? So I'm not sure the pure numbers, but based on just a very quick glimpse of the numbers, what I've come up with is about 33% of colleges and universities are test optional, which leaves 67% of colleges and universities that are not test optional. So for those schools, it would be very beneficial to take the test. Well, and then not even beneficial, it's a requirement to get into that other 67%, if in fact that other 67% is all colleges and universities that do require tests. I'm sure there may be in that 67% some schools that never require an entrance exam. So I maybe guess my numbers may be about 40, 50% to 60, 70% do require you to take the test. So in that case, it would behoove you to take the standardized exam. And also for scholarship purposes, being that, like I said, some schools still require they don't require you to take the standardized test for admissions, but for scholarships, they require you to take the standardized test. So, but again, then you might say, well, if I don't test well, if I'm not going to prepare for the test extensively, then would it, if I don't prepare for it, don't really, not really doing a lot of work to get better at this test, then I'm probably not going to do as well. So if I'm not going to do as well, what purpose is it to submit a lower or moderate test score? Because if in fact it's going to help me for scholarships with some schools, well, scholarships are probably looking for the score to be in the mid-range to higher range, right? So you may be thinking, that way, like maybe, well, if I'm not a good tester, and or for admissions too, like for the test optional schools, if I'm not a good tester, maybe I should just bypass it. What I have read though is that if you do elect to bypass and not take the test, and you're looking just at those test optional schools as your only options, that you should try to submit some kind of project you've worked on, some kind of community service project, some kind of maybe learning project at school, something that will say, hey, to the college universities, I didn't take the standardized test because I'm not a great test taker, but what I do well in is this. What I can show you that's maybe unique from other students is this, right? So you want to have something else. If you're not going to have standardized test, you want to have something else that you're going to provide. Maybe you guys worked on a robotics science project with a robotics team and you traveled to this, you might document it, you might have pictures, and instead of your standardized test, you might supply that, so college universities can buy into you, as, a student that they, that's going to lead to a more well-rounded campus.
That makes sense. Oh, that's an excellent tip. Thank you so much. So with that said, when should students start preparing for the exam? So if you're a junior or if you're a senior, how does that go?
So that's right. So now we're on the assumption that you will take the exam, right? So you decided I will take the exam. And I would probably say it's probably, if you're thinking about it, it's probably a good idea to take it. Just because, and here's the thing too, even if you take it, you don't have to submit your scores to college and universities. You can take it, opt not to send it, and then see your score first. And then you can say, do I want to submit this score to universities, or do I just want to apply to test optional colleges? But at least you kind of know where you stand. So let's assume that you do decide to take it. I would suggest, and I've had people start, I've had some students, 6th and 7th graders. Now this is the extreme case, right? The extreme youngest age was 6th and 7th graders, which I guess would be 12, 13, 14, somewhere in there, years old, starting with the test prep. Now, they could keep up usually with the English, the reading, they were okay, the science, and the math was a challenge more so. But nevertheless, their parents want them to get early exposure because it's just like anything, right? Anything you want to be good with, the earlier you're exposed and the more opportunities you get a chance to practice and see it, the more comfortable you become with that specific task, right? And so that's the thing. And those are usually your really aggressive and very serious families, right? They're the ones who usually start earliest. I've had students start freshman year, sophomore year. But for the most students who do a fairly good point with timing, I would say my short answer is start as early as possible. My longer answer is that I've kind of given my long answer already, right? But most people will start their junior year, right? So about maybe the summer leading up to their junior year, or they will start their junior school year and be tutoring all throughout, because especially in the state of Illinois, they were issuing the SAT, was years before the ACT, then it changed to the SAT, but both tests were issued by early April, maybe second week of April, to all juniors in the state of Illinois at public schools. And so a lot of people use that date and that benchmark. So they say, okay, I know I got to take this test at this date. I'll start maybe that summer before I have to take it, or that school year, and then I'll lead up to it. So that, I mean, that's a pretty good starting point overall. And then after you take the test, a lot of my students will continue doing work after that point, even the summer leading up to their senior years, because they realize that it's one of those things that as you practice, as you work at it, you get better. So why not continue to try to get that score higher for more admissions opportunities and more scholarship opportunities?
I like something you said there in terms of families, starting their scholars off early with sixth grades. And that's like, I talk about that all the time. It's like, to me, that's a strategy. The earlier you start, the better. So it's nice to know that, families do. We have some families that start planning early, to take those tests, those standardized tests, because it's important. And once you get that exposure, you're able to pass those tests with, better scores, shall I say, because I don't know if it's a pass or fail, but, the scores can be better. And I say that like the same thing for college, start planning early, start talking to your children on what you expect of them. What's your expectations? What do your children expect for you? So the earlier, the better. So I like this. I like what you said, but also I want to ask you something about
to that point too. These are, remember, these are extreme cases, bro. It's not the norm at all, right? These are exceptional cases. Northwestern used to have a program where they would take sixth graders and give them the standardized test, and based on how they did, they would allow them to be in these super accelerated programs for sixth graders. Now, obviously, this isn't going on all across the city, right? But that's what's happening in some places. And I think we need to know this, because some people, sixth grade, that's crazy what, some people are doing. So sorry, go ahead.
Oh, that is good to know. Thanks so much for sharing that as well. In terms of, I just wanted to know a little bit more information when you say the students have the options to submit their scores. Yeah. So they can, can you be a little bit clear, meaning that they can actually review their scores before submitting them?
Right. So when you register for the test, so when you register for the test, and part of the registration, they ask you to list 4 or 5 colleges that you want your scores sent to. And so what a lot of people don't realize is that they don't have to select the colleges. Like, that's like an instruction in the registration process. So most people think, oh, let me pick my best colleges, right? But you don't have to do that. You can just simply go over that part, not choose colleges, and that way the score doesn't go out to anyone. It goes to you first. And then once you get the score, you can say, okay, I like the score, I don't like the score. If you like the score, you reach out to ACT, you fill out a form to have them send your scores to different schools. Now, this control over sending out your scores and the frequency of sending out your scores costs you money, obviously, right? So you have to pay $12 to $13 per score report for ACT or SAT when you send them out like that. However, when you register for the test, if you decide to send them to 4 or 5 schools before you know your results, it's free.
Okay.
So you can send them blindly free to 4 or 5 schools, or you can wait to get your results to decide whether you're going to send them or not, but you have to pay for that service. And I usually opt for the latter because you just want to know, what you're submitting.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
So if a student decides to take the exam, which exam should the student take?
That's probably the biggest question, the most popular question that I get asked among a lot of parents and families. And so the short answer to that is take a practice exam for both. Compare how your results, how the test felt, think about which one you think you can improve on with a few minor tweaks, and that's the test for you. That's the short answer. The long answer is it depends on your skill set, right? So the ACT has more questions with less time. The SAT has less questions with more time. So, and when I compare with myself taking both tests and other students taking both tests, what a lot of us has found is that the SAT questions tend to be a little bit more challenging, right? You might have to go, especially the reading, you have to go a little bit deeper than the surface. You have to analyze, synthesize, infer. Whereas with the ACT, you do have to do that for some questions, but most of the questions are just either you remember where you read it and you have to go back to the passage and find it, or they tell you where to look to find it. So it's a lot of finding more with the ACT. Like you're just searching, you got to find this answer, find that answer. SAT, a little bit more reasoning. You have to say, okay, it's not just about me finding that answer. I have to actually read, understand what's being said, and process it a little bit more. You have to do that on both tests, but you seem to do that a little bit more on the SAT than ACT. Hence, that's why they give you more time. I'm talking about the reading sections only. I'd say the writing language section is like that too. So in general, just based on the reading and writing language sections, if you are one who processes a little slower, but when you process slower, you're more accurate, then the SAT is for you. If you're one who works faster and you're not as interested in processing the deep thinking, but more about finding answers, finding facts and stuff like that, the ACT is a better test for you when we talk about the reading and writing language sections. And then it kind of shifts for the math, right? Because the SAT has a math. The SAT math section has non-calculated sections. It has calculated sections. It has grid-in answers where you have to write an answer in. It has multiple choice. So the SAT math is a lot more complex. The ACT math is all multiple choice, all calculated for all questions. So I find that students who have, deficient math skills or average to deficient, the ACT math is a little bit better. Students who have above average skills, the SAT tends to be a little better because you get a little bit more time, but also because they have a non-calculated section and the test knows that, we know that you don't have a calculator, so you're not going to give you super complex problems. If you have good math skills, it's actually a lot easier. So my strongest math students actually prefer SAT math, whereas my average to below average students prefer the ACT math, right? And then the ACT has a science section that the SAT doesn't have. So a lot of people who want to shy away from science, I don't want to do with science, they'll go to SAT. However, what you realize with the ACT science section is that a lot of it is based on charts and graphs and finding information. It's not based as much on having background science knowledge, right? What's the fifth element of the periodic table? I don't know that. Do you know that? I don't know that.
I don't.
Right, yeah. So some people might know that, but that's what you're thinking. Or what's the, what's another question? Maybe what's the chemical equation for, I don't know, hydrochloric acid, right? Most people are thinking that's what they're getting asked in the science section. It's not like that. You're given data and you have to be able to say, okay, based on these trends, what's happening? So it's a lot of questions is based on the information that's already provided you, not requiring you the background information. Some questions do require background information, not all.
Okay.
So I told you, short answer and long answer, right? I'm pretty good with that, huh?
Yeah, and I'm glad to have you on because you're bringing so much clarity to families because this process can be confusing. So I'm sure families appreciate the long answer and the short answer.
Yeah.
When we're talking about admissions, what score is needed for admissions?
Right, and so that's different for different colleges and universities. Obviously, your more prestigious or your, what they call them, higher level institutions like your Ivy Leagues or your big state schools, they're requiring a higher score to get admissions, and obviously a higher score for scholarships because they have so many applicants, right? So they can kind of pick and choose, right? And also because I think it's some value in that too, because I think that you want to be closer in skill set to people who have closer skill sets to you, right? And GPA alone doesn't really tell you that, right? GPA at one high school, GPA at another high school doesn't mean that you have mastered the same amount of academic skills and have, acquired the same amount of academic information, right? And so that's the great equalizer. Standardized testing, it does do that. That's exactly what the standardized testing does. It says, you go to this school, you go to that school, but when you guys take the same test, now I can see how many skills this student has mastered and acquired at this school, how many skills this student has mastered and acquired at this school. And when I'm doing college placement, I can place students accordingly based on that. So I lost the question. Sorry. Can you go back?
Well, we were talking about, what type of scores the students.
So right. So what kind of score? So
Yeah.
I've seen students get in with 18, 17, so maybe some of your schools that don't have as high as the requirement. I've seen some students get in with a 14 or 15 on the ACT, which is closer to like a 700 or 800 on the SAT. But they were, had to take a placement test, or, they had to get in some programs to build up their skills first, maybe take some remedial classes. Some of your middle level schools, some of them may require like a 19, 20. And then your Ivy Leagues, I've heard like the student athletes, they had to get like a 25, 26, but the regular students had to be maybe 28, 29. Obviously, that's different from minorities. That was different from minorities because, a lot of these Ivy Leagues and upper echelon institutions want to diversify their campuses. So at one point, to get more minorities, they realized minorities weren't scoring as high. But now, you got global competition, right? So minority is not just minority in America. Minority is minority everywhere in the whole globe. And so you're getting very, high qualified students, Africans, maybe Europeans, maybe Asians. I'm not sure if Europeans would be qualified as a minority in America. I'm not sure how they classify that. But you got the Asians, Indians, Africans who are coming in under this minority kind of, thing, or diversity, maybe say, not even minority, diversity kind of umbrella. So that has actually made it a little bit more competitive, whereas before maybe it wasn't as global in terms of U.S. colleges and universities admitting students and bringing them in.
Okay. And does those same scores work for scholarships, or I think you gave
it? Usually it's a little higher for scholarships. So I've seen students ACT wise, because I have a little bit more experience with ACT, so that's why I'm telling you ACT numbers. But I've seen students get scholarships for the ACT. I've seen some get them at 20, score of 20, which I think would probably be close to maybe about a 1,000 on the SAT. So if you got like a 21,000, they're partial scholarships, right? Not really full rides. Then like maybe 23, 24, maybe 25, I've seen a little bit more partial, maybe close to 2/3 or 3/4 of your tuition and room and board paid, but you got to come up maybe with a fourth. And then over that, like 26, 27, 28, that's where you tend to see your full scholarships for your African American students, right? White students is typically, they got to do a little higher. In fact, I had one kid who I think he got a 30 or 32, and he was a white American student. And I think his scholarship was kind of, he might not have gotten it, but because he was a football player, he was able to kind of piece that together because, among the white students, they typically are scoring higher on these standardized tests. So their higher scores have to be more in the range with their comrades or contemporaries, so to speak.
Okay. So in terms of scores, because we're talking about scores, how long do you think it take to get like a good score?
Yeah, well, it depends on where you're starting, right? So, because, that's why I tell people, they always, they come in and say, well, I want this score. I say, well, let's see where you start first. And let's get more excited about just growing and progress, because my belief is that anybody can get the score, it's just a matter of time, right? So whether it takes some students 1 or 2 years, or whether it would take other students 10 or 15 years. Now, obviously, a student doesn't have 10 or 15 years to take this test, right? So those students may not ever reach that kind of height, right? But I think, with time they would, obviously, right? Because you just learn the test and you just get better and better, and with repetition, you just become better at the test. But in a general sense, students that I work with who have gotten these, maybe 24s and 25s, depending on where they start. So maybe they started like at 19, 20, got 20, 24, 25. You're talking about maybe, months of tutoring, right? So a whole school year, maybe academic calendar, which would be about what, 9, 10 months
Yes.
of tutoring consistently, three cycles of classes, where you've done 30 classes maybe 3 times, so maybe 100 something classes. That's what you to improve, because it's not easy. Most people think, oh, if I tutor for a month, couple of months, I can get to the score I want. Typically, that's not the case, because there's so many skills that students have to master to do well on these tests. So that's not something, I tell some students, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, so. But we've had some cases, not the norm, who have been able to do some stuff in a couple of weeks, right? They do 3 tutoring sessions and twice a week, 3 times a week or something like that. And for 2 weeks, maybe 6, 8 sessions, and they have made drastic improvements. But for those students, they were already pretty skilled. They just need to learn some different strategies and approaches, so they didn't really need to learn from scratch. Students who are not that skilled, that's the one that takes a long time.
Okay. Wow. Okay. And okay, that makes perfect sense. In terms of the African American community regarding standardized testing, why is such there a negative perception of that? What feedback have you received?
Well, let me ask you, kind of switching roles a little bit. What's your perception of these standardized tests, or what are your clients' perception of these standardized tests?
I would like to share 2 examples with you, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
When I was in high school, which was years ago, I definitely had a negative perception of the ACT. That's what I took. I felt that I was very unprepared for it, and my test results proved that.
Yeah.
There was an option, of course, to retake it, but it seems like to me today the way test taking is, you have more options as well. And so I had a negative perception of it, only because I felt like I wasn't prepared. I was a first generation college student as well, and so I just was not prepared. But when I am talking to clients in terms of standardized testing, and just in my field period with scholarships, what I experience is essay issues, like students don't want to write essays, and it's intimidating to them. And I'm just imagining probably that's the same thing with the ACT, the SAT. Students are intimidated by it.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question too. Going back to your experience, did your school have standardized test prep options for like after school programs and then
no, they didn't.
And was it told to you either by your counselors that you need to sign up for this test prep class, or that these tutors are available to help you prepare for the test? Was that told to you?
No.
Right. And so that would be my experience too, and a lot of experiences of I guess people who are a little bit older than the current high school students. But you're right, it's become now, whereas companies like myself, small companies, a lot of those are popping up in more places, which obviously competition helps to provide these services at a much lower cost, right? Because at that point in time when I was doing it, they were there, but it was the big companies, right? Princeton Review, Kaplan, they were the only ones offering it. Because of that, they could charge all this money because it was a premium thing. There wasn't a lot of people offering it, and the demand was really high, right? I think that part of the reason why we don't like this test is simply we just historically we haven't done as well. African Americans, we haven't done as well. We're not doing as well in a lot of standardized tests, and I think lack of success with anything breeds a certain amount of dislike and distrust for whatever that is. Now, I think the reasons why we haven't had that success is that's why I asked you those questions. We just haven't had these options to prepare, to get ready, to start early, right? That's the biggest difference. That even I have one client specifically, her children were going to school in a predominantly white area, and she just talked about how almost all the kids in the class had tutors, right? That's not happening in our community, right? A kid having a tutor is an anomaly in our communities, right? But in these predominantly white, and not just predominantly white, you got to put the money factor in there too, right? The predominantly and wealthy communities, right? These kids, they all have tutors, right? So not having a tutor is a big thing in those schools, right? Whereas in a lot of our low-income Black communities, having a tutor is a big thing, right? So and that could be, that's socioeconomic. There's a lot of reasons, right? So I think that's the biggest thing. I think the lack of success, but I think if we start to prepare for these things, start to acknowledge these things early on, start to reach out, get resources. You have churches providing this ACT, SAT test prep. You have like some other organizations that are providing it for little to no cost. Our prices are not high, but they're not the lowest either. They're the lowest among, I would say, professional companies, and we try to do that specifically for that reason, right? But we're not as low. I mean, you could probably find something a little lower, but we keep it pretty low. So you have to start. You have to, and another thing is, helping students at home, right? Being life coaches. I think one reason I read was the smartest kids in the world and how they got that way, and they were comparing family environments in America educational system versus family environments in other countries who did very well in education. One of the biggest things they noticed was the parents in America were very involved in the sports and the recreational activities for their children, but they never really talked to them about homework and how they did at school and helping them process what they study, what they learn, and how to think about it, right? Whereas the parents in these other places where education and test scores are really high, it was the opposite. They didn't really participate in the recreational and the other stuff. They weren't selling stuff at the basketball games and cheering and stuff like that. But they made sure they were at home, and they usually would process the day afterwards. How was the day? What'd you guys learn? What'd you guys talk about? Let's process that. Let's talk about it. Let's discuss it. Let's take that learning a little bit deeper, and then let's commit time to actually completing homework. And so I think that's kind of lacking in a lot of our communities too. So you're not getting that. So you're not getting a lot of repetition. You're not getting a lot of skill development. You're not getting a lot of analysis development, and it shows on standardized tests.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I thank you for even explaining how different countries look at parenting, because that is so true. That is so true what you said. So I appreciate just the feedback and the knowledge that you shared with that.
Yeah. So but I'll say this too, and I want to end that, like you said, we can do better, and we are doing better if you look at just like you say these standardized. And I guess this is opinion. I don't have an actual number to say we're doing better than the past, but I just believe with all these standardized testing, companies and tutoring places that you see more available to us Blacks and African Americans, we are able to learn more about these tests and do better on these tests and get some repetition and get some counsel from those who know it a little bit better than us, and Khan Academy did a phenomenal thing with the videos, right? That's free. You can just go in there, you can look up SAT. They only do SAT, but you can look up SAT videos. YouTube has probably some ACT videos. Actually, they do. Like, they take a whole test and they break down the question. They explain to you how you missed this question. So there's a lot now we can do on our own too that didn't even require money, with technology and videos and globalization. So.
Well, what would you like to share, given everything with what's going on in the African American community? And like you said, we are improving on that, which is great. Would you like to share any tips for students, like to be successful on the exam?
Right. So I guess the first thing too is I got to really qualify African American community. I think I'm speaking more to the low income African American community or the disadvantaged African American community, because those that tend to be a little bit middle or higher income, it's not, They don't have the same issues, right? So I think we need to distinguish that as well, because sometimes it doesn't get distinguished. But the tips I would say is, and I've seen people do it. I mean, it really it's what you value, and so especially in downtimes and summer times and weekends, put your child on the schedule. So one of my, I guess I'd call her friend, she started as a client, and then she works same place I work, and she had asked me, hey, I gotta get my daughter started back with tutoring with you, but hey, what are you thinking? So I was just telling her, I said, I tell people all the time, listen, whether it's me or not, you can use my services to help you. You can use our services to help you, obviously. But even if you don't, you need to put your daughter on a schedule. I said, so you guys sit down and decide, what's the schedule? Is it going to be an hour after school 3 days a week? Is it going to be 2 hours on Saturday, 2 hours on Sunday? Set specific times. Every Saturday at 1 o'clock, this is what we're doing. When you go on the computer, you do Khan Academy. That way you can learn a lot on your own. Or you get on the computer, you learn ACT, right? You know what I mean? Without even having to pay money. There's so many free services you can utilize, but you gotta, and the students can learn and understand a lot of it on their own. But you gotta set a certain time and discipline to execute at those moments in time. So it becomes a schedule, routine, not just once, but a schedule or routine that you keep. And even if it's only 1 hour once a week, that's still better than nothing. But if you can keep that 1 hour once a week, the young lady said she started, I don't know if she stayed with it, but she was like, man, it made a big difference in a month. She said, I could tell she was getting a lot better with it, because guess what? All we did was we sat down, we stuck to a schedule. She read a little bit about what she needs to do. She went on Khan Academy, had her daughter working those videos, and they stuck to a schedule, and she could see that her daughter was improving her standardized test skills, right? So that's something you can do without our help. But obviously, you can also seek out companies, tutors, organizations that can help you to, do better and navigate it.
So I know that you help students. So what kind of results have you gotten with your company? What kind of results have you gotten with students?
So we've gotten some good results. But I would say, so we've taken some students who were very low performance and improved their score. We've taken some who were maybe, a little higher than the lower performer, and they became an average performer. And we've taken some students who were average performers to high performers, and we've taken some students who were high performers to even higher, right? So we have some alumni who Ivy League graduates, but we have some who are just, just general, maybe school graduates. We have some HBCU graduates. So we've helped a lot of students, not only with scholarships and admissions, but a lot of the students we've been able to help, they have one thing in common, which was their families took it seriously and they took it seriously. That's the main thing.
That's a winning combination.
That's it. That's essentially what it is. Because, and in that case too, and here's another thing too. So I like I told you, I use Greater Auburn Gresham. I rent out space from Greater Auburn Gresham. They charge me a very low fee because they want a service like this in the community. But at one point I was talking to the director. He's like, hey, we need to get some more kids in our community involved. Let's think about scholarships. And so he actually scholarshiped a couple students free, pay for their test prep class, pay for their books and materials. One thing I found out, they're not sticking with it. Oh. They didn't finish the whole class. They do a few classes and then we don't see them again. Don't hear from them again. And they have it free. Where you got people who paying, the full price and they're sticking with it a little bit longer. And we could delve into that, right? That's another conversation, right? Yeah. But that's just what we've been observing, I've had some students though, and that's not all. Some parents have said, hey, I really want my kid to continue, but I don't have the money. So I have a straight up conversation with them. No problem. Let's give me some, verification of income. We'll take a look at it and we'll price adjust accordingly. Sometimes that could be half off, sometimes it could be 3/4 off, sometimes that could be full scholarship. And the reason I do that is because I see a serious family. I see you serious about this because you showed up, and when you were paying, you paid your money and you were serious about it. So I will say, okay, yeah, I want to help this. I want to see what I can contribute to your continuing, test preparation or academic success because you take this serious. And we scholarship some students fully who have actually taken advantage of the services, who have stayed consistent with it. One young lady, we had her for 2 years before COVID hit. She was full scholarship. people didn't have a lot of money. Her people didn't have a lot of money, but she was serious. She showed up on time. She respected our space, our time. Yeah.
Well, you know, scholarships is my favorite word, so I like that. Thank you
Yeah.
for offering scholarships and offering, you know, and working with families who can
Yeah.
afford the services, but you know, you offer scholarships. So thank you for that, because that's what I talk about all the time, scholarships. And scholarships comes in a number of forms. In this particular form is prepping for your ACT and SAT. What's my last question?
Sure.
We're about 6 months into COVID. What would you like to share some motivation tips with families during this time?
Yeah, you know, I guess the first thing I'd like to say is you know, just try to stay as healthy as possible, you know, because, you know, I think a lot of people are, I think they take it for granted that they'll make it through it. And the numbers suggest that, right? Because the death rate percentage-wise is low. You look at the numbers, it sounds like a lot numbers-wise, but the actual percentage death rate, I think, is maybe 5%, 3%, somewhere in there, right? It's very low as opposed to the people who contracted, right? But that doesn't mean that you won't contract it and that you'll be alive, you know. And I think that's the thing, you know. I mean, for the most part, most people are surviving it, but some are not, and some family members are not. So, you know, my number one thing is stay healthy. You know, try to eat right, get your rest, take your vitamins. One thing I like to do is garlic and vitamin C. I have respiratory issues, so I'm really sensitive to the COVID, and I try to, you know, be a little bit more cautious than the average person, just because I know that, you know, COVID attacks the respiratory system. And so, you know, if I get it, my chances of survival are lower than the average person. And so, you know, one thing I try to do is I try to, you know, keep my immune system up, take my vitamins, my supplements, garlic, olive leaf, vitamin C. I take high doses vitamin C. I was instructed by Osero Set Society when they do pretty good. I was raised in that community religious organization. I still partake. And so one thing they were talking about is the health and nutrition piece and how to stay healthy. You keep your immune system healthy, so if you do contract it, your system is able to battle it. But even given that, you know, that's my number one thing is health. But obviously that's physical health. But I guess the next thing is mental health. Is you know, try to stay as positive as possible despite it. You know, and try to figure out, you know, what you can do, not just focusing on what you can't do, you know, because there are a lot of things that obviously we can't do that we're restricted from doing. But let's just remember, you know, all the things that we can do, right? That we are able to do. You know, some people have, you know, equated COVID to prison, you know, totally different, you know. But some people go, oh, I'm locked up, I'm in a prison, I can't do everything I want to do. Yeah, well, just consider it like this too for a lot of you people, even some of your teenagers. You've been alive 17, 18 years. So I mean, really, what's 2 years, right? If you can stay healthy, you know, and be healthy on the other side of this 2 years, well, then, you know, you got several more years to still, you know, live and enjoy your life. So you sacrifice maybe 2 years, you know, or whatever, a year. You know, it's like a fast, right? You don't eat for a day or 2 days, right? You know, so yeah, it's obviously the timing is a little bit different, but you know, that's what I like to say. You know, if you look at it as a relative to the scope of your whole life and life expectations, you know, you can make it. We can make it. We can make it through, and we will. You know, the best that we can. You know.
Okay.
Did that answer the question?
Yes, thank you for the tips. Before we let you go, can you give us your contact information?
You know what? And I think I really got off track with my tips. I forgot while I was here. I was here for ACT, SAT prep, right? I just went on a general thing. So let me give you those tips, what I would suggest. And this is what some of my students have done. And I think this is what people are looking for more for. So some of my students have still kept up with tutoring because I guess their parents or their families are still working from home. So salaries and monies haven't necessarily increased or decreased. So what some of my students did was they utilized this time where they weren't able to be as active, you know, in the world, right? You can't be going out and you're not able to do as much. So they use that time to study a little bit more, to dedicate more time to preparing for these tests, learning more about these tests, right? Because since you can't do anything and you got to stay in a lot, and you know what I mean, you can't go as many places, you got more time on your hands. And the summertime became a great. So I had some clients who were doing twice a week ACT, SAT tutoring and test prep. So now they've positioned themselves pretty well. So I would say in this time of, you know, isolation, or, you know, staying away from people, or however, you know, not as much outward activity, it's more inward activity, and you can invest your time with that standardized test prep, because, you know, it's a timing thing, and the more you practice, the better you get. And if you get really good at it, you can set yourself up for some nice scholarships, you know, and like you say, scholarship, Mama likes scholarships. I think we all like them, you know. And so sorry, that I think that probably would be a better tip, right, than what tips I gave. They were a little bit more on general conversational tips. Yeah.
Okay.
So my contact information is
that's okay. Thank you.
That's okay. Okay. My contact information is www.actprepchicago.com. So that's www.actprepchicago.com. ACT Prep Chicago, one word. If you type it up into a Google search or to your URL address, it should come up. That's our website. Our phone number is 773-474-2540. My name is Mr. Glenn. I'm the owner and managing director. I'm usually the one who fields the calls. I am the only one who fields the calls from incoming customers, and then, you know, I match you with the best tutor based on your needs and so forth and so on. And then the email address is ACT Prep Chicago, one word again, at yahoo.com. So ACTPREPCHICAGO at yahoo.com is our email address.
Thank you. To my podcast listeners, I want you to also know that Mr. Glenn was a featured presenter at Scholarship Momma virtual event, a Scholar's Playbook. If you're interested in his presentation, you are welcome to email me at scholarshipmomma.com. That's info@scholarshipmomma.com. That's INFO at scholarshipmomma, SCHOLARSHIPMOMMA.com. And I will forward a link to you for you to get his speech. Thank you again. And listeners, I will see you next time.
Thank you. Thank you again, Scholarship Momma, for having me. And I appreciate the hard work you're doing to not only help students get scholarships, but to bring subject matter experts that have to deal with college admissions together, and allowing this platform for us to be able to reach an audience of, you know, young college students and families who are very interested in their children's future. So thank you.
You're welcome.